So last week's video was about something a little heated, and whilst I don't think it's going to get a great deal better for us on that front where Pokemon Sword and Shield is concerned, I want to detox from a lot of the negativity coming off of the National Dex debate and rein it in a bit to talk about Pokemon box arts. Because, you know, it's an idea that I've had for a while and I'm pretty sure nobody's done it, at least I hope. Box art across the wide variety of video games out there can just be plain beautiful to outright laughable. The latter outcome being one that is commonly associated with Japanese franchises that ended up becoming westernized to some extent. Thankfully, Pokemon has never greatly suffered as a result of this, and whilst I'm not sure I'm going to be able to cover them all in extensive detail, I wanted to take a little time to appreciate some of the box arts in the series because I think they're pretty interesting to look at in all honesty, and that sounds like a really boring idea for a video, but I just wanted to do something chill and relaxed as I said before. Starting in no particular order really, can we talk about the box art for the whole of Generation 1 in Japan? I don't think Pokemon was made a lot worse off when initially brought overseas, but I am a huge fan of the original first generation covers to begin with. Not sure if this is because of the framing of the art itself feeling a lot fuller than their forcefully cropped western counterparts or just the cool ring and stylized text around them, but these feel like more thoughtful compositions as opposed to a combination of an existing art and then a logo. This trend of making vastly different Japanese box art stayed in some aspects throughout the series, but not nearly as much as the original games. With remakes, however, I always appreciated the new poses that older Pokemon would get other than having Ken Sugimori's base art dropped in front of a background. I think my absolute favourites have to be for Heart Gold and Soul Silver, with the Kanto remakes coming a close second. They're fairly dynamic as far as the main JRPG box arts go, but I feel that even as late on in the series with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, do the remakes continue to have thoughtful backgrounds that are simply gorgeous to look at. Well, with the exception of Pokemon Let's Go, I appreciate the attempt at an entirely new style going forward, but this grassy background just kinda exudes a real boring atmosphere for your game that you really should be using to show off the power of your remake, right? Granted, the background for the next games, which are obviously going to be Sword and Shield, don't appear any better. Looks like some shit you'd find on an Amazon pre-order page back when it was called like 2019 Pokemon Game Switch or something. See, this is kind of disappointing because Ultra Sun and Moon did this really cool thing where if you put the box arts together you can make out Ultra Necrozma in the middle, which is also just building on top of some spectacular background art. X and Y is pretty noteworthy too because you can even see the background of that game's box art shining through the letters of said game. Though I am glad that even though we've maintained that red and blue theming throughout the series, we've never delved back into the oversaturated Gen 1 box arts or the dimly lit Gen 3 ones. Like, come on, this has to be a contender for the worst the series has to offer. At least Sword and Shield cropped the art well, but the original Pokemon Ruby is just graphic design gore. All of that being said, the main series followed some consistency in that each pair of games used some fantastic art as the main draw to get people into the series. I think it's interesting how a little people undervalue the importance of good box art. Striking a first impression of any game is important in any capacity, and for the longest time the only way you'd get that first impression is by looking at it on the shelf. That's why when I walked into Blockbuster one day and saw Pokemon Battle Revolution on the shelf right next to Pokemon Pearl, I took the game with the cool dragon instead of the one with all the grotesque Wii-era 3D models. Like, could you imagine my first experience with the Pokemon series was not the core RPG marking the beginning of the era where the series began to peak stylistically, and instead was with the battle simulator that was practically unplayable unless I owned Diamond and Pearl in the first place? Like, I don't even think I'd be here making this video if it wasn't for that choice, so let's hone in on why the 3D model era for Pokemon spin-off box art looked pretty dated even for the time. Now, on the Japanese front, it wasn't actually terrible. I in fact own sealed copies of Pokemon Stadium 1 and Pokemon Stadium Gold and Silver in all of their awkward cuboid glory, and they look fantastic. Those games used those 3D models on the box art back in an era where having 3D models in any game was considered exciting. Though I'd argue that when Stadium 2 got rebranded as Stadium 1 coming to the West, we weren't so lucky. Gold and Silver remained pretty much identical, whereas Stadium 2 was like the bare minimum. Colosseum and Gale of Darkness also look even worse because by the time of the GameCube, seeing any Pokemon in 3D was simply just a dated concept after the original Stadium games completely served that purpose. I don't think even in hindsight the 3D models inherently look bad though. Albeit confusing, our Stadium 1, which was Japan's Stadium 2, is a fantastic example of where this all goes well. Unlike the original Stadium 1 in Japan, this one had all of the first generation Pokemon in it as opposed to a smaller selection. So to sell that aspect of the game, they managed to absolutely fill it with Pokemon and managed to tie it all together visually somehow. Look at this. I don't know whether it's the well done composition of having all the most recognizable Generation 1 Pokemon front and center, or the fact that I can barely name a single Pokemon that is missing in all of those background renders, with the exception of Ghastly Smoke, of course. The absolute peak of Pokemon spin-off box art in the West, however, might have to go to the Mystery Dungeon series. Even as late on in the spin-off line as Super Mystery Dungeon, the box arts for the sub-series have all looked fantastic, though the gold standard has to be from the original Mystery Dungeon pair, Red and Blue Rescue Team. Not only are the individual pieces themselves excellent, but you'll notice that they actually connect and make up a larger piece when placed vertically, which is such a genius way of representing the relationship between separation of the pair by the systems they were released on, Blue being on DS and Red being underneath on Game Boy Advance. I suppose an honorable mention could go to Pokemon Troze for the DS. The cutesy style in game is reflected so well in the minimal box art, and I personally cannot get enough of it. Many of the other spin-offs in the series tend to also have some fantastic box art, but they've just really been drawn by Ken Sugimori or have been inspired by him, who has obviously been instrumental in the series' art direction since the start. Though this was a fun video to make, it's pretty short as you can see, and I wanted to apologize about the lack of uploads and the length of this video being on the short side. After entirely moving house for the summer and the legions of issues that ended up coming with that, it's taken me such a long time to get settled, and if you follow me on Twitter, you'll probably realize why that is. Hopefully stuff gets more consistent for the rest of the summer. Thanks for watching, and if you wanted to take a look at that very angry, not very angry, actually it was kind of angry, National Dex controversy breakdown video that I did last week, I'd appreciate it. The feedback on that was really something special, so I'm going to try to hold the same level of quality when it comes to future videos from this point forward. See you guys next week. Hopefully. I don't know, no promises.